Grums on X. Why Denuvo kills game performance has been found. This is from Valentin Ignatev. Finally learned why Denuvo destroys performance. It runs normal code through a fantasy stack-based VM that JITs the code back together with a bunch of junk jumps on the fly, completely trashing CPU cache and undoing optimizations that developers worked hard on. And this is apart from constant timing and fingerprinting and a bunch of other evil stuff. Truly the bane of gaming. And showing a screenshot here of the exact code that they've found of why Denuvo is actually destroying your game performance. As much as Denuvo claims that that isn't happening, according to this guy, they now have tangible proof of it's happening. Says this amazing video from Nathan Baggs goes over a lot of what Denuvo is doing. This kind of shit is why you need a supercomputer to run games that look no better than something from 2015. Imagine working your ass off, praying to a statue of Mike Action in your bedroom, and then some twitchy manager on cocaine demands that you transpile 6 years of hard work through a spiritual Python interpreter. People who seriously say, this has no impact on performance, know nothing about programming. This is Nathan Baggs, how to hack a Denuvo game.
Of 3 months worth of work, the largest project I've ever worked on. Normally when I look at DRM, I try not to look too much at prior art, as the fun is in the discovery. However, for this, I did do a lot of research as part of it, and I'll link all the resources down below. So what game was the subject of my 3 months of misery? The classic Formula 1 2016.
Formula 1.
I chose this game for several reasons. It's an unlisted game, so there's no impact to sales. There's already a crack for it, so I'm not changing the status quo, and it uses an early version of Denuvo. On that last point, it means that nothing I do will affect modern games. The techniques I show here have all been fixed on modern versions of Denuvo, but the fundamentals of how it works remains largely the same. When the game starts, it collects a bunch of information about the hardware it's on, the hardware IDs. These are then sent to the server. The server takes the constants of the game you're running and encrypts them with a key derived from the hardware IDs. It sends this blob of encrypted constants back to your machine, and this is known as the token file. At runtime, the game will decrypt the constants using the hardware IDs. The idea being that if you've copied the game and token file to a different machine, then the constants will decrypt to different values, due to the hardware being different. At this point, the game will likely crash. This diagram certainly clears things up.
Just a bit of insight for Denuvo. There is no official public record for how much it costs for a game company to implement Denuvo into their game, but there are rumors and estimated ranges of them paying between $100,000 and $500,000 to implement it, plus a license fee for a standard AAA game and its launch title. The high-end major AAA games and long support anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million to implement Denuvo into their games. And all it does is supposedly protect from piracy. And it's really hard to get around it. We're finding out in real time here that it's because they go into random areas of the code and jack it up to make it really hard to crack. But by doing that, it jacks up the loading of the game.
But what happens if you make a legitimate change to your hardware? Well, there's a provision made for this at the start of the game. Denuvo will do a check against all the hardware IDs and see if they match the token file. If not, then it will delete the token file and request a new one. And it is this check that is the focus of our project. If we can bypass this check, then we know we've identified all the hardware IDs the game uses. The game itself will have many, many checks, but they will all be based on those initial checks. So the game is to identify what information Denuvo wants and feed it to that so it thinks the token...
This right here, Kara, this is the point that I always go back to. This is what's so frustrating about Denuvo. If you make a really good game, you will make more money than God. Just make a really good game. If you focus on the piracy or I don't want people stealing this game or this, that, the other thing, you're forgetting the point of why you're making the game. You're spending more money on the piracy protection and ruining the performance overall of the game for everyone than just going forward without it.
Token file is valid for the current machine, even though we'll generate the token file on a different PC. Of course, it's not as simple as that. Denuvo has a bunch of anti-tamper checks that prevent us from easily patching the code. There's 3 components to this project. 1, the Denuvo hardware ID checks, which actually check the machine is associated with the token. 2, the anti-tamper checks, which continually verify if the code has been tampered with. And 3, the virtualization layer, which obfuscates all the code. We'll need to dive through and handle each of those layers in order to influence the game as it's running. We can use a tool called Detect It Easy to get some information about the game. We can see here it's using Denuvo version 2 with Steam, and the S-data section of the binary is packed, i.e. obfuscated. So given just this information, we can make some inferences. The first is that the S-data section is probably going to contain the important code we want as it's protected. In fact, looking at it in Ghidra, we can see that the rest of it is just garbage.
Does Bethesda use Denuvo? Yes. Doom Eternal has Denuvo anti-tamper. Rage 2, Wolfenstein Youngblood, Ghostwire Tokyo. Bethesda added Denuvo later. So some games don't launch with it. Sometimes they add it afterwards. Starfield did not end up being a big Denuvo headline the way some other Bethesda published games did. It used Steam and standard Microsoft ecosystem protections, but not Denuvo. Indiana Jones, there was Denuvo Scare, but Bethesda said the retail version would not ship with Denuvo. Bethesda has absolutely deployed Denuvo on PC before, but they'll sometimes remove it later once the sales window cools down. Because that's the thing with Denuvo, is they purchase it, but then they pay a licensing fee to continue use it in the months later on. And with every sale going through, a percent of sales typically go allegedly to the company of Denuvo. So after the launch window of the mass amount of sales go through, then they remove Denuvo after it.
But they're what you would probably expect: reading from memory, writing to memory, maths operations, and calling functions. As I mentioned before, this is all stack-based. If we look at the add instruction, we see it adds 2 values together on the virtual stack and writes the result back to the virtual stack. The Denuvo code will largely be executed via this VM, so we need to start to break it down and build some tooling around it. There are 3 components to this machinery we need to find to recover a protected function.
Let me skip ahead to the end. I'll share this in the chat if you guys want to watch the whole thing, but this is it's a very long video. It's very data heavy. So
how anticlimactic. 3 months of late nights, long hours, and frustrating work to not see a pop-up. We're now in the main Denuvo checks, which are designed to crash when the hardware IDs are incorrect, rather than display a friendly pop-up. The thing is that this video was not meant to be a full crack. It was to explore the mechanics of Denuvo and some of the techniques used to bypass it. If we wanted to do a full crack, we would just need to grind out and patch all the checks, which is more of just the same. However, a core part of Denuvo is randomness, so it could easily take another 3 months with Pin to find them all. I'll link the resources I used for this project in the description, but I just want to say a huge thank you to Carl, who helped keep me sane during all this.
I could only imagine spending the time for 3 months going through trying to crack a Denuvo game to explain how you did it and what it does. I guess it is one of those explanations for real nerds, way above my pay grade for understanding what the hell he's even talking about. But I go back to the basics of, if it makes the game run worse, don't put it in your game. I don't need to know how the hot dog's made. I just need to know that the hot dog needs to be good. Okay. I don't need to know how it's made. It is fascinating. And how these guys have discovered Denuvo is being used to destroy performance is fascinating. And this is the original guy that I saw it from. Thanks to Grums as well for sharing it. But this is crazy. This is crazy. But I'll leave that one there.